Italy is one of those places we all feel like we know. The food, the art, the history. But the story of how it actually became one country, well, that's one of the most passionate, messy, and fascinating stories in all of European history. So let's get into it. Let's unpack this beautiful, eternal argument about what it means to be Italy. And it really all starts with a simple question. How can a single nation feel like 20 completely different worlds all stitched together? I mean, you can travel from the Alps down to Sicily, and it really does feel less like one country and more like a collection of ancient, distinct little kingdoms. The reason why? Well, it goes way, way back.
And if you want to understand Italy, you have to understand this one single word, campanilismo. It literally translates to bell towerism. For centuries, your identity wasn't Italian. Not at all. You were Florentine or Venetian or Roman. Your entire world, your loyalty, your sense of who you were, was defined by the town that was within sight of your local church's bell tower.
And this makes total sense when you look at a map of the Italian peninsula for the 1400 years after the fall of the Roman Empire. It was just a complete patchwork. Up north, you had these incredibly powerful and rich city-states, like Venice and Florence. The middle, that was the Papal States, ruled by the Pope, acting as this giant political wall cutting the peninsula in half. And the south was basically a revolving door of foreign kings, Byzantines, Normans, Spaniard, you name it. The result wasn't a country. It was what people called an Italy of 100 cities. But then, in the 19th century, this radical idea starts to catch fire, the dream of a single, unified Italy. This whole movement was called the Risorgimento, or the Resurgence, and it was really driven by three incredible, larger-than-life figures, each with a totally different idea of what this new Italy should look like. So what was the spark that lit this fire? Well, ironically, it was a French guy, Napoleon Bonaparte. When he stormed through in 1796, he just tossed all the old maps out the window. He completely erased ancient borders, and mostly for his own imperial ambitions, he created this thing called the Kingdom of Italy. Now, it was just a puppet state, of course, but for the first time in forever, it gave Italians a little taste of what a unified peninsula could be. And you just can't put that genie back in the bottle. And that brings us to our three architects. First, you have Giuseppe Mazzini. They called him the Soul. He was this passionate revolutionary who dreamed of an Italy that was a democratic republic for the people. Then you have Count Cavour, the Brain, a brilliant, calculating diplomat who wanted Italy to be a monarchy led by his own kingdom of Piedmont. And finally, there's Giuseppe Garibaldi, the Sword, a legendary swashbuckling general who just wanted Italy united. And frankly, he didn't really care how it got done. So you have these three competing forces: revolutionary passion, shrewd politics, and raw military power. Eventually, they all collide to create a new Italian kingdom. But the birth of this nation, it wasn't some simple, happy victory. It was a messy, problematic compromise that created one kingdom on the map, but in reality, two very, very different Italys. And a final push happened so fast it would make your head spin. In 1859, Cavour, the diplomat, cleverly unites the North. Just 1 year later, Garibaldi, the general, takes a tiny army of 1,000 volunteers in red shirts and somehow conquers the entire South. It's an incredible story. And this all leads to this critical moment in 1861. To stop a civil war from breaking out between his Republican followers and Cavour's monarchy, Garibaldi makes this huge sacrifice. He just hands over everything he conquered to the King of Piedmont. And just like that, in 1861, the Kingdom of Italy is officially proclaimed. It's a huge moment, right? It's the birth of modern Italy. But it's also the very beginning of the country's deepest, most painful internal conflict. Because from day one, this new nation was fundamentally split. The North was industrializing, it was connected to the rest of Europe, it was looking forward. The South was still largely agrarian, almost feudal in its structure, and totally isolated. So for people in the South, it really didn't feel like they were being ruled by a new Italian king. It felt like they had been conquered by the King of Piedmont, a northerner. This problem became known as the Questione Meridionale, the Southern Question. In fact, there's a word for what happened: Piedmontization. All the laws, the bureaucracy, the taxes from the northern kingdom of Piedmont were just slapped on to the rest of the country. For millions of people in Sicily and Naples, this didn't feel like a unification of equals. It felt like a hostile takeover. And this famous quote from the statesman Massimo d'Azeglio just captures the whole challenge perfectly. He said, "We have made Italy. Now we must make Italians." I mean, think about that. The country existed on paper. The political part was done.
But the much, much harder job of actually making these different peoples feel like one, that had barely even started. So, as we head into the 20th century, all of this unresolved tension bubbles over. And it leads to a much more aggressive and ultimately pretty catastrophic attempt to just force a single identity onto the entire nation. The real turning point here is World War I. Now, Italy fought on the winning side, but at the peace conferences, they felt like they got cheated, that they were denied the territory they had been promised. This national sense of shame and betrayal was known as the mutilated victory. And it created this really toxic, angry political atmosphere, which was the perfect breeding ground for a guy like Benito Mussolini. Mussolini's fascist regime basically tried to solve the problem with brute force. What was his plan? Well, first, he plastered the country with symbols of the ancient Roman Empire, trying to give everyone a sense of shared historical glory. Second, he launched these massive infrastructure projects, trying to literally build bridges between North and South. And third, he finally made peace with the Pope, signing a treaty in 1929, ending a bitter feud that had been going on since 1870. But, it was all surface-level stuff. It was a facade. At its heart, the fascist project cared way more about war, building an empire, and national prestige than it did about solving the real, deep economic inequality between a factory worker in Milan and a poor farmer in Sicily. The core problem? It never went away. And that brings us, believe it or not, right up to the present day. Because the ghost of 1861, this fundamental argument about what Italy is, it's still very much alive. It continues to shape Italian culture and politics right now, in 2026. And you can see it plain as day in their politics. You have political movements like the Lega Nord, the Northern League, whose entire platform for years was built on the frustrations of the North. They demand more regional autonomy, and they argue that their tax money is being wasted propping up a less productive South. It is the exact same argument from 1861, just wearing a modern suit. But here's the final, and I think really beautiful irony in all of this. That very thing that made unifying Italy so incredibly difficult, those 1400 years of being split apart, that's exactly what created Italy's superpower. The incredible regional food, the different dialects, the unique art and culture you find in every single town, that is Italy's greatest gift to the world. And it exists because of its fragmented past, not in spite of it. So in the end, it leaves us with this one big, fascinating question. Was the unification of Italy this grand act of liberation for the Italian people? Or was it just the beginning of a beautiful, passionate, and truly eternal argument that they're still having to this very day?